I saw things like Batman the TV show, which wasn't overtly gay, but it was camp as anything.
Yeah.
And it connected with me in some way. I became hyper excited, and not sexually, just excited, just thinking, what is this? This is something I really have to be a part of, and have to. It just vibrated, I suppose.
Hi, my name is Peter Cannett, and I am here with the iconic likes of Fenton Bailey, the producer and director, the founder of World of Wonder, the executive producer of RuPaul's Drag Race and all its iterations all around the world, and now the author of the new book, ScreenAge. Welcome, Fenton. It's so good to have you here. So, I just want to start off by thanking you. As this wonderful book makes very clear, you have done so much for bringing queer visibility to the mainstream. I don't even know if I'd be sitting here if it wasn't for you, so I just want to start off by thanking you for
That's
that.
very sweet of you. I remember though, when was it? Like the very first time I met you, you interviewed me for something.
I think it was the Chaz Bono documentary.
I think it was, that's right, yeah.
And I think I was like 23 years old.
Yeah, no, I think it was like one of your first interviews.
It was, yeah, at Sundance, I think.
Yes.
Yes.
I was there then.
I'm curious, this is an obvious question, but what made you decide that now was the time to write this book?
Practically speaking, COVID had a lot to do with it. Like we were shooting Drag Race Down Under and Drag Race UK. And so every time we went, I had to spend 2 weeks locked away, literally locked away. They took it really seriously in Auckland. You could not leave your room. So that was sort of the impetus. But also it was thinking that, TV has been so attacked, and there've been so many books about how awful TV is and what the age of missing information, amusing ourselves to death. Great books, but all of them fundamentally negative about TV. And I just felt, as someone who's made my living in TV, that I don't have these feelings about TV, that it's ruined everything. And I actually then began to think about it, and I actually sort of came to the conclusion that TV has completely changed our lives and changed who we are in a really fundamental way. And that why not say that? Not let all these intellectuals carry the day with their sort of bitter rants against television.
Yeah, and I think as queer people especially, movies obviously are incredible and they do a lot of great things, but the access that we have to them usually comes a little bit later. For me, Roseanne, and not to speak of that woman, but that show did do a lot for me as a queer person, because it was the first time I ever saw that.
No, absolutely. I think it sort of, I'm decades older than you, but I saw things like Batman the TV show, which wasn't overtly gay, but it was camp as anything.
Yeah.
And it connected with me in some way. I became hyper excited, and not sexually, just excited, just thinking, what is this? This is something I really have to be a part of, and have to. It just vibrated, I suppose. And TV shows have done that and introduced me to queer characters that I would never have otherwise known. And I actually think that, funnily enough, it's not just that television has changed our lives, it's that television has been a fundamental workaround for those of us who've been invisible. And through working, and that's what I've been sort of continually wondering, why are there so many of us in media and TV and movies? Just thinking, it seems disproportionate. And I come to the conclusion that actually the screen gives us a visibility that our own communities, our families, whatever, have had traditionally denied us.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And at one point you say, I'm sorry if I'm paraphrasing, something along the lines of television is not really about anything. It's more so about the flow, and you would joke, it's not the medium as a message, the medium is the massage.
Yes.
Do you want to just talk a little bit about that? I feel this book has a lot of interesting things to say about television.
It's so great to be here in Canada, in Toronto, because for me, a big milestone event was when I came and visited City TV. It was, oh my God, in the 80s, I think, in the late 80s. It was just such an exciting place, and I called them up and I said, can you send me some stuff? And they said, no, we don't send out tapes. You have to, if you want to see it, come. And you know what? I did the strangest thing. I actually bought a plane ticket and came, thinking I was going to meet, this kind of weird guru cult leader, Moses Naima, which did not happen. But that was fine because, I'd seen Videodrome as one of my favorite movies, and Max Headroom and MTV, and all this stuff really came from Canada. Began, Much Music came before MTV. And the whole idea of the storefront studio, that is now a staple of breakfast TV on, NBC and ABC, that started here. It was Moses. He said these sort of gnomic utterances, not the medium as the massage, but he would sort of say, he kind of had this axe to grind with print journalism, because print journalism always said that TV was superficial and shallow. And he said, well, because it's exciting or visual, why does that mean it's shallow? Or because something is short, why does that mean it has no content?
Yeah.
So he sort of got my mind racing about that maybe soundbite culture and maybe popular culture and maybe TV and all that it brings and commercials and televangelism and public access, maybe it isn't such a bad thing.
Yeah, well, as a representative of the Canadian media, I'm very, we're grateful that we've made some sort of impact on you, sort of, and your legacy.
It's been transformational.
Okay.
That's really. It's so funny because with Canada's Drag Race, one of the executives at Crave is always like, it's not as, they're continually anxious. It's not as good as the US, or that Canada doesn't have quite the luster of the US. And I'm like, that is bullshit, And your series, Canada's a Drag, I actually used that series in the pitch meeting because the executive was saying, well, there aren't many drag queens in Canada. And I was like, girl, you're going to watch this.
That's like all of this team sort of graduated to this show. So it's all of us. Yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah, no, absolutely our pleasure. Speaking of Drag Race and sort of its international takeover, I'm just curious what's sort of your dream country or just sort of an aspirational idea for where Drag Race could go from here? Because it's everywhere now.
Well, my dream country is, Iran or Iraq or Russia. And in fact, I said as much, and Breitbart picked it up and said I was going to get beheaded, or But I do think there's sometimes people say, there's just so many versions of Drag Race, and I hope there's more, because I think that what the show does at its heart is it inspires people, gay or straight, to have more empathy for people who are not like them.
Yeah.
And it does so in a way that's so sort of joyful and fun and hopefully irresistible. It's like, why would you resent this person who looks so fabulous and is so funny and is so creative and talented? So hopefully that's what the show does. And because I think we just seem to be in this weird time.
Unfortunately, we are, yeah. And more so than we were when Drag Race started in many ways. And I think that the impact that the show is making in all these countries all around the world is really sort of endless.
I think some of the backlash is, okay, well, let's make queens and trans people the target because they've suddenly become visible in a way they weren't before.
Yeah.
And I think that's, when you think about it, is like, why should anyone in this life be consigned to a life of invisibility?
Yeah, and you're right. And with that visibility, I guess, comes all of this horrible. The people come out of the woodwork with their horrible.
Because they don't want. They would. Okay, you can be gay, but just be over here. What is that, like Victorian thing about seen and not heard?
Yeah, but I mean. We're not going anywhere. They're not going anywhere.
No. The toothpaste is not going back in the tube.
Graham Norton writes the foreword of this book. It's a very lovely foreword. And he quotes you in it from your 1997 speech at the GLAAD Media Awards. I'm just going to read it so I don't misquote you. You say in that speech, until we embrace the zaniest, freakiest, and gayest among us, there can be no fairness. And that speech was 26, 27 years ago at this point.
I know, right? I feel like I'm being carbon dated.
I just want to know what you think about what's happened since then. And we were just talking about it a little bit now, and where we go from here in terms of reaching that goal.
Right. I am convinced that what is happening right now is the latest moral panic. And if you look at moral panics, none of them have ever succeeded. And they come, remember there was that time when it was rap music was like the end of the world and lyrics were going to be the end of civilization. And then you also do you remember that thing about piracy was going to be the end of everything. So there are these moral panics and they're just not based in reality. And the good news is they kind of fizzle out, I guess, until someone finds something else to freak out about. But it would be great if we could just get to a place where we aren't forever singling people out and excluding them and judging them, and that we just embrace. Because I think, when I look at someone like Rue or any queen, to me they're artists, and they're just so creative, and they make life more fun.
Yeah.
More pleasant to be around.
And I think the difference between this moral panic in terms of like queer people is now we're in the mainstream, and very much thanks to, in part to Rue and all the work that you have done. So it's not like it's some underground thing anymore. Like
Right.
the straight mother in Nebraska watches RuPaul's
Yeah.
Drag Race. That
Yeah.
wasn't the case with the panic sort of in the 80s specifically. So that gives me a lot of hope, because I feel like they just don't have the numbers to beat us at this point.
I don't want to ignore the fact that, there is real danger for
Absolutely.
people and real suffering, but this will fail. This initiative of theirs to shove us back in the closet, to make us invisible, to erase us, it will fail. It has always failed. I mean, all the suffering and agony notwithstanding. It's weird, isn't it? Because I was thinking the other day about Liberace. I mean, the queerest possible thing, hiding in plain sight.
Yeah.
And I know, in the wake of his death, Liberace was much criticized for not coming out. But I think, on the other hand, he was like a Trojan horse and brought queer identity and culture and ideas right into the American mainstream. And I think, we kind of stand on his shoulders, and we stand on so many other people's shoulders, and it's a gradual, it's never quick enough, and one step forward, one step back, or 3, 4, it's a gradual process.
Yeah, and in a completely different direction. There's so many incredible stories in this book, but one that really stood out to me was the one where you went to North Korea and the time
right.
that you spent there. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? Because I was just so fascinated by this and what you learned.
I wouldn't go today.
I know.
Friends of mine just said, well, we're going to, they'd done this thing called art diplomacy. So they'd taken Francis Bacon to Moscow and Gilbert and George to Beijing. And their latest idea was they were going to take an artist to North Korea. They'd been invited to bring a Western artist to North Korea for the first time. And they said, do you want to make a documentary about it? I was like, are you kidding? So we went on the recce. We went to meet the government and sort of dot all the I's and cross all the T's. And it was the most extraordinary thing, because you get off the plane and you're just in another world. And you go to Europe, or wherever you go, there's a sameness, there's a familiarity. But this was like an alien landscape. And it was incredible.
Also, you have, through World of Wonder, made documentary projects about everyone from Tammy Faye to Britney Spears, Chaz Bono, Mapplethorpe. Is there one project of all of those incredible documentaries that really sort of just has a place in your heart? Not to make you sort of choose a favorite child, but that just sort of, you just are so deeply proud of above all else.
Well, weirdly, actually, one of the ones personally, and I don't think Randy would agree with me here, because he's not such a Britney fan as I am, but I was really proud of the Britney film. And then in the light of everything that's happened, of course, it's like, well, this was we made the film documenting her getting ready for the residency in Vegas. And, I think people forget that no artist of her stature or at her young age then had ever done that. Yeah. And everyone was saying it's going to fail. And yet it really changed Vegas, And I think she's always been this kind of pioneer.
Who of anybody that you haven't documented is sort of your dream?
Well, it was going to be Lil Nas X, but here we are at TIFF, and there's a documentary.
Okay, so it's an alternative?
Well, maybe there's a sequel, Lil Nas X 2.
Or take your own World of Wonder spin on it.
Right, exactly. I adore him, and I think I'm just so excited by him as an artist. Just coming along and just being and clapping back and not being politically sensitive and not being deferential and just calling it out. I just think he's amazing.
I feel like that quote that you about until we embrace the zaniest, freakiest, gayest. Lil Nas X is sort of the embodiment of that dream for you. I feel like he's doing something in the mainstream that, in a way, no one else has really done before.
You're right,
yeah.
And courageous of him too, because I think there's such an expectation in the black community that you would be a rap artist or that you'd be straight. I get the impression that, I don't really know, but I just get the impression that in the black community, homophobia can be that much more intense. And so he's just like out and proud and just fabulously sissy. You know, I think that's the thing is it's the sissy thing that's like, you know, even in our own community, we're sometimes like discriminate against the femmes, you know.
Yeah. So there are so many stories in this book. I'm curious, like, when you decided to take on this project, where you even started, given how much you have to tell and how many stories probably couldn't make it in this book because
Well,
you'd be
maybe
sued.
Yeah, well, I was gonna say maybe there's volume 2, but like I have to tell you, well, you know this, like it's not easy writing a book. It's like, you know, there's no button you can push. Unfortunately, would be so. Actually, I guess with Chat GPT now.
Well, we don't want to push those buttons.
Okay,
those buttons
yeah.
are bad.
But I actually started. The first chapter I wrote was the Britney chapter.
Okay.
Because I had just been burning up about it, and the Free Britney movement was just causing me agita. And there was the Free Britney people did a podcast, and they quoted me in the thing, and I was just so angry about it because they sort of twisted it around. And I was like, I'm gonna get them. And so that was the first chapter. But it was supposed to be, it's like mission creep. You think, oh, I'm just gonna put in a new kitchen cabinet, and then the next thing you know, you've ripped out the kitchen, you're redoing the bathroom, and then you're rebuilding the whole house. So that's how it sort of evolved.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it must have been sort of like a puzzle in many ways because there's so much time that is represented in here and represented very well. No, but I know.
I agree with you. I agree.
Very well spent time is what I mean more. Like you've done a lot in the sort of 30, 40 years that are represented in this book. Anyway, thank you so much for being here, and thank you so much for writing this book. Everybody, please read ScreenAge.
Let's do it again in like a few years.
Yeah, for sure. Okay.